1513, Florence, Italy. Niccolò Machiavelli sits in exile, writing by candlelight. He's been tortured, betrayed, cast out from the city he served. And in his isolation, he writes something that will haunt humanity for 5 centuries. Not the prince. Everyone knows the prince. I'm talking about what he wrote in the margins, in his private letters, in the conversations no one was supposed to hear. A single law, so simple, so obvious, yet invisible to most. The law that separates the powerful from the powerless, the rulers from the ruled, the wolves from the sheep. And here's what they don't tell you. This law isn't about politics, it's about silence. Strategic, deliberate, weaponized silence. Machiavelli discovered that the most powerful men in history shared one trait. Not intelligence, not ruthlessness, not charisma. They talked less. And when they did speak, every word carried weight. Every sentence moved pieces on the board. Nothing was wasted. But here's the disturbing part. It wasn't just a tactic, it was survival. Because Machiavelli understood something about power that most people refuse to accept. The moment you speak, you reveal yourself. You expose your hand. You give your enemies ammunition. You scatter your energy into the void. And once it's out there, you can't take it back. Machiavelli wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." He wasn't giving advice. He was revealing a mechanism, the invisible architecture of power. And that mechanism runs on silence. This is the hidden codex, where ancient wisdom meets modern power. Niccolò Machiavelli, 1469 to 1527, Florentine diplomat, political theorist, strategist. To the world he's known for The Prince, a book about how to acquire and maintain political power, ruthless, amoral, infamous. But that book was a distraction, a public face, a calculated move to regain favor with the Medici family after his exile. What Machiavelli really believed, what he really understood about power, he scattered across letters, private conversations, and coded passages in his lesser-known works. And one theme appeared again and again, the danger of speaking. Not lying, not manipulation, just speaking. Because Machiavelli observed something in the courts of Florence, in the halls of Rome, in the back rooms where real power was exchanged. The men who talked the most fell first. The ones who boasted, who explained, who justified, who announced their plans, they never lasted. But the ones who stayed quiet, the ones who listened more than they spoke, the ones who moved in silence, they ruled for decades, sometimes generations, and no one saw them coming. Before we go deeper, if you sense there's more to reality than what you've been told, if you're ready to see what most people refuse to see, subscribe to the Hidden Codex. Turn on notifications, because what comes next cannot be unlearned. Let's continue. Machiavelli identified what he called the trap of justification. Here's how it works. When you announce your intentions, you feel powerful. You feel decisive. You feel like you're taking control. But you're not. You're opening yourself to attack, to doubt, to interference. Because the moment you speak, people start to form opinions. They start to position themselves for you, against you, neutral, but watching. And every opinion weakens you. Not because people's thoughts have mystical power, but because they start preparing. Your enemies sharpen their knives. Your allies start calculating what they'll gain. Neutral parties start choosing sides. You've turned a private decision into a public spectacle. And now, you're accountable, to everyone, for something that hasn't even happened yet. Machiavelli saw this destroy princes, generals, merchants, and diplomats, over and over. They'd announce a campaign, a venture, an alliance. And before they could even begin, resistance would form, opposition would organize, sabotage would start. Not because the plan was bad, but because people had time to react. Silence removes that advantage. When you move without warning, when you act without announcement, people can only respond after the fact. And by then, it's too late. Machiavelli wrote in a letter to Francesco Vettori, "I have learned to keep my counsel, for every word spoken is a weapon given to another." He wasn't being paranoid, he was being accurate. Because in Florence, in Rome, in every court he navigated, loose lips didn't just sink ships, they ended bloodlines. So how does this work in practice? Let's say you're building something, a business, a career, a life. Most people do this. They tell everyone, friends, family, colleagues, social media. I'm starting a company. I'm writing a book. I'm going to change my life. And what happens? Opinions flood in, doubts arise, questions multiply. Are you sure? What if it fails? Have you thought about? And slowly, imperceptibly, your resolve weakens. Your vision blurs. Your energy drains. 6 months later, nothing. But if you understand Machiavelli's law, you stay silent. You work in the dark, build in private, let results speak. No announcements, no updates, no explanations. And here's what happens. Your energy compounds. Your focus intensifies. Doubt has no entry point. Then one day you emerge, not with promises, with proof. And people don't just hear about your success, they feel it, they see it, undeniable. That's power. Machiavelli watched the Medici family do this for decades. They didn't announce their moves, they made them. Quietly, ruthlessly, effectively. By the time anyone realized what was happening, it was already done. And the Medicis, they ruled Florence for generations. But there's a darker layer to this, something Machiavelli only hinted at. Because silence isn't just about strategy, it's about control. Control over yourself. When you speak, you're not just revealing information, you're releasing tension, seeking validation, testing reactions. You're giving away control to the listener, to the audience, to anyone who hears you. And once you've given it away, you can't get it back. Machiavelli understood this viscerally. During his torture, after the Medicis returned to power, he was subjected to the strappato, a brutal method. They tied his hands behind his back, hoisted him by a rope, then dropped him partway. Again and again. The goal? Make him talk, make him confess, make him name names. He stayed silent, not because he had nothing to say, but because he understood. The moment he spoke, he'd lose the only power he had left, the power to withhold. In his personal notes, written after his release, he recorded, "They can break the body, but the mind, only you can surrender." And he never did. That silence saved his life, because his captors couldn't prove anything, couldn't extract leverage, couldn't use his words against him. He gave them nothing, and eventually they had to let him go. Most people think silence is passive, weak, avoidant. Machiavelli saw something else. He saw silence as active, aggressive, strategic. Because when you're silent, people fill the void. They project, they assume, they imagine. And you can use that. You can let them believe what they want to believe. Let them underestimate you. Let them think you're harmless, unambitious, content. And while they're busy imagining, you're moving. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince, "It is better to be feared than loved, if one cannot be both." But in his private letters, he wrote something else. "It is better to be unknown than either. For the man who is feared can be challenged. The man who is loved can be betrayed. But the man who is unknown cannot be touched." That's the forbidden secret, the one they don't teach. Because if everyone knew it, the game would change. Power wouldn't belong to the loudest, the most visible, the most charismatic. It would belong to the silent, the patient, the invisible. And that terrifies people, because it means everything you've been told about success is backwards. You don't need to network aggressively. You don't need to personal brand yourself. You don't need to announce every move. You need to shut up, work, execute, let results echo louder than words ever could. 3 years after his exile, Machiavelli wrote The Prince. It's filled with advice about power. But here's what most people miss. He wasn't writing for princes. He was writing for himself, processing his observations, documenting the patterns he'd seen. And one pattern appeared in every chapter. The successful rulers, the ones who lasted, they all shared a common trait. They were masters of silence. They didn't explain their decisions. They made them. They didn't justify their actions. They acted. They didn't seek approval. They moved. And by the time anyone questioned them, the outcome was already decided. Machiavelli called this preemptive certainty, the appearance of inevitability, when something happens so decisively, so completely, that resistance seems pointless. That's not luck, that's design, and it starts with silence. Because when you talk, you invite debate. When you explain, you invite doubt. When you announce, you invite interference. But when you simply act, people can only choose to accept or resist a reality that's already unfolding. And most people, they choose acceptance, because resistance is exhausting, and most people are tired. So how do you cultivate this? How do you weaponize silence in a world that demands constant communication? Machiavelli's answer: discipline. Every day, you'll feel the urge to speak, to explain yourself, to defend your choices, to announce your plans. That urge is the enemy. It's not coming from strength. It's coming from insecurity, from the need for validation, from the fear that if you don't speak, you'll be forgotten. But Machiavelli knew the forgotten man is the dangerous man because no one sees him coming. So you resist the urge. You bite your tongue. You let the silence sit, heavy, uncomfortable, thick, and you watch what happens. People start projecting. They start assuming. They start filling the void with their own narratives. And you let them. You let them believe whatever they want, because their beliefs don't affect your reality. Only your actions do. Machiavelli wrote to his friend Giovanni Vernacci, "I have learned that men judge by appearances. They see what you show them, nothing more. So show them nothing, and they will imagine you as they wish, and you will be free." Free, that's the word he used, because silence isn't confinement. It's liberation. Liberation from the need to perform, to justify, to be understood. You move, you act, you build, and the world catches up later. Or it doesn't. Either way, you're already gone. But here's where it gets disturbing. Machiavelli noticed something else, something he only wrote about once, in a letter that was lost for centuries and only rediscovered in the 19th century. He noticed that powerful men didn't just talk less, they seemed to hear more. Not in a mystical sense, in a practical one. When you're silent, you're not broadcasting. You're receiving, you're listening, you're observing, and you start to notice things, patterns, contradictions, lies. Machiavelli wrote, "In 10 conversations, 9 men will tell you who they are, but only if you let them speak. And most people are too busy talking to listen." So the powerful man stays quiet. He nods. He asks short questions. He lets the other person fill the room with words. And in those words, he finds leverage, weakness, desire, fear. Not because he's manipulative, but because people reveal themselves, constantly, involuntarily. And the man who listens collects the pieces. He doesn't use them immediately. He stores them, files them, waits. And when the moment comes, he knows exactly what to say, exactly what to do, exactly where to press. Because he listened, while everyone else was talking. Machiavelli observed this in Cesare Borgia, one of the most effective and brutal rulers of Renaissance Italy. Borgia rarely spoke in meetings. He'd sit, listen, watch. And then, when everyone had exhausted themselves with debate, he'd say one sentence, one command, one decision. And it would be final, not because he was the most intelligent, but because he'd heard everything, processed everything, and knew exactly what needed to happen. No debate, no negotiation, just action. And people followed, not because they loved him, but because resistance felt futile. He'd already considered every angle, already anticipated every objection. Silence had given him the high ground. Machiavelli wrote, "Borgia's power was not in his words, it was in his stillness. Men feared him not because of what he said, but because they never knew what he was thinking. That uncertainty is a weapon." Now let's go even deeper, because Machiavelli understood something most people never consider. Speech is a form of payment. Every time you explain yourself, every time you justify your actions, every time you announce your plans, you're paying. Paying with your power, paying with your mystery, paying with your energy. And here's the trap. The world demands payment constantly. Society expects you to explain, to justify, to be transparent. And most people pay because they're afraid of being misunderstood, afraid of being judged. But Machiavelli saw this as submission, as voluntary disempowerment, because once you start paying, you never stop. You'll spend your entire life explaining yourself, justifying your choices, seeking approval. And at the end, you'll have nothing left, because you gave it all away, in words, in explanations, in the desperate need to be understood. But the powerful man, he refuses to pay. He lets people misunderstand, let them judge, let them wonder. Because their confusion is his protection. Their curiosity is his moat. Their uncertainty is his advantage. Machiavelli wrote, "The prince must be a fox and a lion, the fox to recognize traps, the lion to frighten wolves. But before either, he must be silent, For the silent man is neither fox nor lion. He is a shadow. And shadows? They can't be caught, can't be pinned down, can't be defeated, because no one knows where they are or what they're planning until it's too late. So what does this mean for you right now in the modern world? It means you need to audit your speech, every conversation, every text, every post. Ask yourself, am I giving away power? Am I revealing too much? Am I seeking validation? If the answer is yes, stop. Not because you're hiding, but because you're conserving energy, conserving leverage, conserving mystery. The world will pressure you to speak, to share, to be visible. It will make you feel like silence is stagnation. It's not. Silence is accumulation of power, of focus, of certainty. And when you finally move, it won't be a request. It won't be a proposal. It'll be a fact, undeniable, irreversible. That's what Machiavelli knew. That's what the powerful have always known. And now, you know it too. Here's what Machiavelli actually meant, the core of everything. He wasn't teaching ruthlessness. He wasn't teaching manipulation. He was teaching sovereignty. Sovereignty over yourself, your words, your energy, your power. And sovereignty begins with silence. Because in a world where everyone is talking, explaining, broadcasting, the silent man is invisible. And the invisible man? He has all the time in the world to watch, to learn, to position himself. And when he finally acts, no one saw it coming. No one prepared. No one even knew he was a player. That's the forbidden secret. The one Machiavelli whispered to himself in exile. The one he encoded in his letters. The one powerful men have guarded for centuries. Talk less. Listen more. Move in silence. And let your results be deafening. Machiavelli wrote in his final letter, days before his death, I have seen princes rise and fall. I have seen empires built and destroyed, and the difference between them was never strength. It was restraint, the restraint to hold power silently, to move without warning, to win without words. He died in 1527, poor, forgotten by most, buried in a modest grave. But his ideas, they outlived kingdoms, they shaped nations, they built empires. Because he understood the one law that never changes. Power flows toward silence. Not because silence is passive, but because silence is patient. And patience always wins. Look around. In your own life, how many people do you know who talk constantly about what they're going to do? How many of them actually do it? Now think of the people who quietly built something, who didn't announce, didn't explain, just worked. Where are they now? And where are the talkers? Machiavelli saw this pattern 500 years ago, and it's still playing out today. Because human nature doesn't change. The need for validation doesn't change. The urge to speak doesn't change. But the ones who resist that urge, they're the ones who inherit the earth. Quietly, deliberately, invisibly. Until one day you look up and realize they already won, and you never even noticed. Because they never announced it. They just did it. And by the time you heard about it, it was already too late. That's Machiavelli's forbidden secret. The one they don't teach. The one that separates the rulers from the ruled. The powerful from the powerless. The wolves from the sheep. Talk less. Move in silence. Let the world discover your power only after it's too late to stop it. Machiavelli saw something most refuse to see. Not because it's complicated, but because it's uncomfortable. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that changes you. Forever. The question now is, are you ready for that change? Or will you look away? Most people look away, but you're still here. So maybe you're different. If this opened your eyes to something hidden, hit that subscribe button. Because here at the Hidden Codex, we don't stop at the surface. We go deeper, into the shadows, into the silence, into the truth they tried to bury. Next time, we'll explore what Nietzsche discovered about suffering and why he said most people live as slaves without even knowing it. You don't want to miss that. Until then, stay awake.